Greg, China's our largest trading partner, so that's surely a warning that applies to thousands of Australian businesses. How worried should Australian business owners be, and how can they prepare for it?
Well, Amanda, it's great to be with you. That's absolutely right. It applies to us more than to any other nation on earth, I should think. There's, in a sense, nothing new in the report. I mean, it's a very good report, very, very useful, but it just systematises what we already know. I mean, Australian executives have been going to jail in China, for some time. China still has 2 of our citizens in prison on completely trumped up charges. It still has a range of trade embargoes against us. The government says in everything but on the record briefings that the overwhelming source of cyber attacks on Australian companies and on Australian government bodies is from China. I think we're in a very dangerous period now because China has actually switched away from its wolf warrior rhetoric, which at least had the virtue of telling us what was really going on, to charming and emollient rhetoric again. But that doesn't disguise the reality. Companies are tremendously exposed, and it's a real contradiction in our national life. I mean, Angela Merkel asked Tony Abbott how we felt about China, and he said, well, a mixture of fear and greed. We do want to make a lot of money out of China, and we do make a lot of money out of China, but at the same time, it is our chief strategic threat and our chief strategic competitor. And it's a big danger that people will be lulled into a false sense of security simply because the wolf warrior diplomacy has finished. And I think every company that operates in China should be very, very concerned about this and probably should have as small an expat staff as possible and hope for the best. Maybe it should diversify somewhere else and operate in Vietnam or India.
I think diversification is going to be vital. Greg, China clearly sees intimidation and bullying tactics as a fair game strategy to get their way. But surely it really is time for Australia and Western democracies to try and wean themselves off the Chinese supply line and become a bit more self-sufficient and a bit more careful about who they trade with. As you say, diversify.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And we have a terrible record of diversifying in Australia. So we have this tremendous trade dependency on China. Now, China needs our product. That's why they didn't really do us any harm in the wolf warrior diplomacy period. The trade embargoes against us were quite minor, really. But we had the chance, for example, to make India our new China. And when India wanted to make its first big investment in Australia, the Adani mine, we put it through 10 years of a water torture and made it almost impossible for it to invest in this country. So it's as if we were determined to keep our dependency on China. Then, we saw the ridiculous 99-year lease of the Darwin port. Well, the Chinese know that if they pay a state government or a territory government 5% over the odds because they've got strategic interests rather than commercial interests, they can win every time. So eventually we had to reform our foreign investment approvals. But Western governments are very slow about this. There's been an enormous amount of talk about putting in new secure supply chains and so on. But Western nations have been very, very slow to do this. Russia has been at war in the Ukraine for 500 days, and we still haven't increased defence production, either in this country or in the West generally. You still get the sense that the West is sleepwalking towards disaster in relation to China.
We can't afford to be slow learners here. If China's willing to attack and boycott companies that question them on their human rights abuses, why do you think Energy Minister Chris Bowen has adopted a strategy of relying on Chinese-made solar panels, wind turbines and batteries to keep the lights on and ensure our energy security?
Well, Amanda, I take the point of your question, but with all due respect, I'm not going to be kind to your former colleagues. The current government is simply continuing the policy of the previous government. In other words, there is a complete disconnect in Australian life, which transcends party politics, between understanding what our deep strategic circumstances are and our deep security needs, and letting that impinge in any way on our commercial behaviour. So our universities became completely dependent on the Chinese market. We are, as you say, totally dependent on China to produce the vast majority of the technology and products we'll use in our renewable energy. But, you know, I'm not shy of criticising the Labor Party, but let me tell you, this government is no different from the last government, and the last government was no better than this government in exactly this area.
Well, we can't afford to be slow learners, no matter what colour T-shirt we wear. Greg Sheridan, thank you very much for your time.